Normal people who have dated famous people, how was it like? Friend of a friend is engaged to Jonah Hill. He's a nice guy. They travel a lot. He obviously is pretty wealthy but funny. Relatively normal. I dated the drummer from a very popular band and moonlighted for 2 other very popular bands for about a year. He went on tour and I was in college, so it didn't work out. But we're still really close friends and talk frequently. He never signed anything for me because he always said, "I only sign stuff for people I'll never see again." He says that still. And it's kind of cool because we see each other every now and then since we live relatively close to each other. It was fun showing up with him to my friends' birthdays and stuff. They were all kind of starstruck because they loved one of the really huge bands, and he would turn on the charm and make it special. He was as a good sport about that sort of thing. I dated a well-known news anchor for about a few months, which was based out of New York City. To be fair, I had no clue who he was, and his first introduction should have been a massive red flag. We met in a bar in Nick during a private fundraising event for charity a few years ago. Him: "Hi. Do you know who I am?" Me: "Should I?" Him: looks at me a bit bewildered and tells me his name. I give him the same face back, after which he tells me which channel he's on. That initial interaction should have told me to get the FCK out of there. But he was good looking enough that I ignored his initial narcissism. During the course of the relationship, he learned next to nothing about me or what I do for a living and barely scratched the surface on my likes or dislikes. I'm not sure if he's on TV anymore, but I know he's no longer on that channel. He's in San Diego now. He's a pretty big deal. A friend of mine dated Misha Barton while she was filming the pilot for the OC. They were fairly serious. Lots of actors in LA film pilots. So we were all just this group of young hopefuls who played pool and drank together. Well, the show got picked up and was a hit, and they broke up almost immediately. It was like she disappeared to another planet. My buddy was just as bummed as anyone would be to get dumped by a beautiful woman that they were really into. We were talking about how sad he was about it while grocery shopping one day, and when we got to the checkout, her face was on the cover of 3 or 4 magazines. We had a laugh, but I felt for the dude. I dated a guy who had a lot of international success in the late 90s. He hit me up on Instagram. He's still an A-list celebrity in my country and he's a very nice guy, but he's clearly been affected by not having been told no for 20 years. During both our first 2 dates he asked if we could watch him on TV. He hadn't seen the final product and wanted to know how he did. That was a little weird. I eventually called it quits because even though we just dated casually, I heard through the geopavine that he got around and I don't like to share. I once had sex with Eartha Kitt in an airplane bathroom. How TF did that Larry guy end up with Liz Taylor? He even looked like he was permanently stunned to be at her side. Sorry. Probably way before everyone's time on here. She met him at rehab. Treatment center romances can be quite torrid. People get a little crazy to not concentrate on themselves, and then concentrate on finding someone I can be sober with. It often turns into a hot mess quickly. The most surprising thing about it was how long it lasted. My ex-boyfriend's step-aunt apparently dated James Franco in the 90s. Said they broke up because he was a womanizer and a cheater. I bet your ex-boyfriend's step-aunt knows. Not me, but friend of a friend dated Bill Clinton's brother, as teens so not famous at the time. Said they used to smoke pot together and Bill did inhale. My cousin's mother-in-law is engaged to the voice of Squidward. Never met him. Assume he's funny. But I do know that he is very short. My mother dated an A-list singer in the 80s who is now still fairly famous. Probably a B+ list now. He was supposedly the worst driver she ever encountered. But other than that, pretty nice. Her boss at the time had 2 daughters who really loved him. So he dropped off a bunch of signed merchandise and talked her boss into promoting her. She didn't take the pressure wonderfully. They got mobbed once or twice in public and she once caught photographers in front of my grandma's house. His parents made them break up because she wasn't the right religion. Despite being at that time one of the biggest names, his parents still controlled him. My mom went to one of his concerts a few years ago hoping she could bump into him, but it didn't happen. Apparently security had heard the "I used to date him" line before. People think influencers are celebrities. My family always got a kick out of how my great aunt went on a few dates with Bill Cosby. My niece dated R. Kelly for a while. Went out with some guy who considered himself a vlogger. Spent so much time trying to look good on camera and pretending to look different. Talk about faking things. Left him after 4 weeks. I know someone whose mum dated Gordon Ramsay before she met her dad. Apparently he's a really nice guy. The TV stuff seems to be a persona to drive people to exceed. Bestmate dated an it girl who was distantly on the line to the throne apparently. She was batshit crazy. When they broke up, used her influence to try to have him sacked from his job. 2 lawyers turned up with a 30-page NDA with a note from her saying she had her last ex's passport taken off him and he's now a junkie in a bedsit, so he better sign it. Didn't date anyone famous, but I am an Eskimo brother to Randy Travis. F-ked up. He, the comedian, never laughed at my jokes. Even to this day when see him on the screen I am annoyed. I had fantastic jokes I made to impress him. Wasted. Well, not wasted. He used them on his BBC program. At least they made people laugh. What better outcome than that? I was never going to do that. Dated a famous guitarist whose band was big in the 2000s. Still is, but that was their prime. Anyways. He was sweet but as most. A cheater. He just seemed lost all the time also as to what he even wanted or who he even was. Even after we split and seeing him go through all these relationships and then a marriage divorce, he still seems unhappy as hell. Hope he gets his shit together eventually. Edit. I dated a construction engineer who built a lot of highways ramps. About 7 years ago, my brother's fiancée went out on a couple dates with Andrew Shaw from the Chicago Blackhawks. She said he was kind of boring and narcissistic, but he gave her 2 center ice tickets to come see him play at the United Center. She invited my brother, who is a huge sports fan. That was their first date. Since none of these are people actually dating famous people, I knew a couple where one of them was modestly famous, successful indie musician. They got on like basically any other couple. He'd get recognized if they were out on the town, but he did most of his partying on the road and she did girls' nights out. They had trouble staying in touch while touring just because of crazy hours and phone reception. But they got through it like most any couple where one of them is on the road like salesman and whatnot. Really not much was different than normal. It's not like dated, but my grandma met Al Pacino when she was 26 and they were really close but never really dated because my grandma fell in love with my grandpa, so that was kinda cool. I hit on Brooke Hogan at a party once. She shot me down. Had no idea who she was until my friends told me. I was a legend amongst the punes for a day. Wasn't a date, but I am counting it as a score. That's awesome, brother. We didn't date, but it was freaking obnoxious. I dreaded most of our dates in public because inevitably someone would recognize him and want to chat or make a big deal about it. Sometimes people would even sit at our table and keep talking to him as though it wasn't obvious we were on a date. I'll never date a celebrity again. I like peace and anonymity too much. I dated a locally famous artist. Turns out he's not humble. Even a little. He comes off as quite shy, etc. But he's an alcoholic, a racist, homophobic, egocentric asshole. He's an illegal immigrant with 3 DUIs and domestic violence charges. But holy FCK, he's a good artist. She's not famous. Yet. The dating part was great. Ollie Murs is so full of himself, it's incredible. Went on a date with Michael Sam, gay football player. He was pretty cool. I once walked into the bathroom and saw Mr. Belgin getting a blowjob in a dive bar in LA. I couldn't think of what to do, so I just said Zach Morris to the principal's office and turned and walked out. Some things you can't unsee. I'm upvoting this in hopes people post some crazy stories about us celebrities they've dated. I need my stories. I used to date Mila Kunis. It was great at first, but then I woke up. I did the bunny hop while holding Demi Moore's waist at a club in Denver. Does that count? She was kind of cranky, but I was a fan of General Hospital and she'd just left the show. So I probably shouldn't have kept bringing it up. Not me, but my now passed away dog dated the Taco Bell Chihuahua. She wanted some pups, but all he wanted was Taco Bell. He seemed like such a nice dog too. I had a brief fling with Olivia Newton-John in the 80s. We met at a mall in Southern California. She saw me, and without me even saying a word, she kissed me. We parted ways shortly after. I was 2 at the time. Edit. For clarification, my dad took me to the mall. ONJ was there and took a picture with me and kissed me. So now I can tell people that Olivia Newton-John kissed me. I dated an MLB player. He cheated the entire time. But I'll be honest, I was so in love with him and the lifestyle that I didn't care. All athletes have this amazing ability to disregard any form of a conscience. What else was it like? Well, we could buy whatever we wanted, whenever we wanted. There was a surprising amount of boring downtime. He hated people coming up to him. And he married someone else and still tries to cheat on her with me. 6 years later. So I dated an IG influencer back in college. Not famous, but girls would recognize her in the streets. Nick. It was fine and first, but we couldn't even get a drink at the bar without people coming up to her for a selfie. And the guys were beyond creepy. I would often catch men, middle-aged mostly, just staring her down. I called out a few and they left us alone after that. Anyway, social media dictated her happiness. We would be having a great time and she would completely lose it because her video only got X amount of likes. I eventually broke it off because of the stress her career had on the relationship. TLDR. Not me, but my cousin married a football player for the St. Louis Rams, and whenever they came over to our family gatherings it was so awkward because we didn't want to be too chills around him, but we also didn't want to fan out on him. I didn't date a famous person. Bit a famous person's son. I was spoiled and that was very nice. Dinners out all the time. Expensive gifts. Half of my purses now are high-end ones that his mom just didn't want anymore or got as presents from people buttering up her husband. When I was out with his family, his dad was often stopped and recognized by people. Relationship didn't work out because my ex, son of the famous person, was afraid of moving out of his parents' house and losing their financial support. He ended up cheating on me. I dated for 3 months a famous digital influencer here in Brazil and it was terrible. Every single moment I had a camera on my face and he was so fake with his followers. His 10-12-year-old fans sent me hate messages on Instagram threatening me for posting stories with him. Never again. I haven't. But my cousin's ex-wife's sister dated Adam Sandler in college. Do you know what that makes us? Absolutely nothing. Family friend dated Juliet from Lost for a while. He said it was really tough to be in public with her because she would get swarmed. She apparently really loved walking dogs and actually took our dog on a walk one time when she visited. She loved being in the middle of nowhere apparently. She was exceptionally nice though, and we talked a lot about the Red Sox, which was cool for young me. Girl I work with is good friends with someone who is dating a League One footballer. He cheats on her all the time and often ignores her, but she stays with him because of the social status and money. My neighbor took her family friend to prom. It was Screech from Saved by the Bell. My mom met her now best friend at a party. The friend was new in town, so my mom brought baby me over to play with her kids. She said the entryway had a ton of sports memorabilia, so she assumed they were just really big sports fans. The friend's husband came home in workout clothes, apologizes because he's been at practice, and my mom says, "Which high school are you coaching?" He was actually a big deal NBA player who'd recently been traded to our city's team. He's always been a really cool, family-oriented guy. He'd take us behind the scenes for all the games. Floor seats. It was a blast. He's still involved in the NBA now, not as a player, and is just as cool. My so dated Rosaria Dawson. Very briefly. He says nothing came of it. They just didn't click. So now I am the woman that surpassed Rosario Dawson in both looks and charming personality. Not me. And this is from a while ago. But a friend's sister dated Max Bear Jr. Jethro from the Beverly Hillbillies. They parted on good terms. He is a super nice guy. Smart and kind. He could not come to the sister's wedding but sent a nice letter and an extremely generous gift.